Everybody. When we do this, again, the 19th year we've done this, one of the things that comes to mind is like, when you're in HR, you really, when you do your training on performance evaluations, make sure you're talking about all the different concepts, and you end up with a 12-page evaluation. And then the employee sits in front of you and goes to page 12 and sees what the merit increase was. So sometimes I feel like this presentation is like that. So in our material here, we wanted to make sure, let's get the budgets out of the way. So let's get the numbers so if you need to dash off, you're ready. But we're also going to talk about what we see as trends. What's interesting this year, obviously, is COVID-19 is this umbrella of things that we have to take care of. But there's always been this current of things as the industry evolves and retail evolves and employees evolve, that we need to keep looking going forward on those things. We'll talk about how variable pay is tracking for the year. We'll look at some specific things from our databases, our benefits databases, which is executive and staff. So those are the things we're going to go through. So without further ado, let's get started on the budget material.
So as we're looking at the budgets, as many people really projected, we are seeing a decrease in the budgets that are being projected from, and in this case, we're looking at the World at Work results. You kind of notice from 2020 to 2021, you do see a decrease, but it's only a 0.1 or a 0.2 decrease. However, that is actually a pretty substantial decrease. That does mean that there are a lot of organizations in the financial services sector that decided not to increase their budgets or not to increase their salary structures. So to be able to move down that 0.2, 0.1 or 0.2% is kind of substantial. It is actually telling there. This is the first time in almost a decade that we're seeing a decrease in these things. So if you look at the top there, we're just looking at the overall. So in 2020, the increases were about 3.2%. Looking at 2021, as far as projected results, we're looking at 3.1% salary budget increases. So we are seeing a little bit of a decrease in the trend there, which has been pretty stable for quite a few years. We also kind of show you a demonstration of the breakdown of how the different areas are going to be moving for non-exempt, exempt, and executives. And you'll see that World at Work is predicting that the biggest change is going to be in the executive area, dropping from a 3.3% salary increase down to a 3.0%. The other side of this as well is that we're looking at salary structure movements. This is a big key differentiation if you're going to be moving your salary structure this year or not. It's very important to communicate that moving salary structures is very different than moving merit increases or moving individuals through their budgets. So if you say that this year is not going to be a salary structure increase, make sure that communication structure is in place. And we're going to talk a little bit about this in the future here, talking about the dangers of not moving that, especially if you haven't done a compensation study recently to understand where you are in competitive relation to the market. So these pieces all kind of tied together to the trends that we're seeing, that budgets are going to be tighter. There's been a lot of conversations. We're going to talk about this a little bit down the road when we get into the HR topics as well. There's been more and more conversations there that are surrounding the fact of, should we move our budgets? Should we actually move our salary structures? And we certainly have an opinion on that. And John and I will kind of dig into that a little bit more.
I know a lot of times people are in budget right now saying, what is HR's contribution, going forward for 2021? And there will be, a idea that, well, maybe let's push off anything and freeze budgets, for the year and see how it goes. Now remember, financial services is a unique animal, and they're continuing to track. The thing that we have in our corner is inflation is really under control. So a lot of times when you would look at World at Work numbers, you were trying to gauge those to an inflation number, and they track beautifully. But the idea is, in financial services, I think if you don't do it for a year, we're going to have some catch up, and that's when we start to lose people. Now, we do a study that looks at, we ask our clients what they want to do for the year, and we've done this for a number of years. When you look at a national number, it always includes some of the credit unions that have capital concerns. And so obviously those folks are under a tighter constraint than the regular population, so to speak. And there's folks that are in the moderate position, and there's folks that are doing really well. So what we've always liked to do is say, what are, and we break it down by our clients and our research by those three categories. So when you look at folks that are under 7%, and it's less than 2% of the credits in the United States this year, which is, testament that we've kept our capital good. You're seeing people go flat, but you're also going people 2 or 3, and that, a scooch above inflation at that point. So when you see these two sets of numbers, think of that first number as kind of the midpoint, the median, and then the second number is kind of the 75th percentile. So if you're in this range, that's how I would kind of gauge it. So when you look at sufficiently capitalized, you see that move up to 2 to 3.5 for staff, 3.5 to 5 for executives. And then finally, in well capitalized, we see those folks still committed to a nice trend line there. I've got a lot of questions recently because of the COVID assets that have gone, into the organizations about, our capital position is slipped, not because we're not performing, it's just because the denominator is bigger. So if you've been in well capitalized using those numbers for the last few years, I'd go ahead and use them. This isn't a golden rule per se that, if you're at 9.98, you're in one category, and if you're 10.01, you're in another. So I'd go ahead and keep using those well capitalized. I just think it saves you time on the back end, and that would keep you consistent.
I think a very important point is when you're looking at these, you do see a differentiation. I think John really illustrated the differentiation from looking at a very broad number from World at Work and looking at our numbers, where we do take into consideration the inflation, the salary structure movements, as well as the fact of, especially if you're a D Hilton compensation client, we talk about experience equity adjustments and how to keep your team in alignment with the market. So if you're budgeting just that 3% and not taking into consideration any other type of movements, these kind of structures will give you that opportunity to have that flexibility to make sure you're maintaining competitive nature to the market.
And the other question that I get a lot is, well, is there regional differences in the numbers? And of course, if you want to drill down and laser down, of course, there's just a little nuance to the numbers, and we really think the national is kind of a better scorecard to look at, as opposed to, I mean, we're talking basis points on those differences. And then when you look at, if you look at World at Work data, you'll see the regional cuts, if that's something that your board or the management team really wants to hone in. But I don't think it's going to give you any relief or give you any panic if you're not matching those numbers.
So one question that we do have is, how often do you recommend doing a compensation study? Here we follow basically every other year. We want to do a full study. That's a market pricing analysis and a strategic analysis of your entire organization from the ground up. Every position is market priced in the local market to understand exactly how competitive you're being. We do a full analysis based off of that, and then we do a support year afterwards to make sure that if you have any new positions that are created, any positions that are changed or adjusted or something along that line, we're able to then sit that into the structure, make sure that's maintaining a competitive nature as well as an internal equity balance. So the short answer to that is we don't recommend going past 2 years when you look at a compensation study, because the market will move without you. And especially in these kind of situations where the market is really kind of settling out of a huge fluctuation in a lot of pieces, it's good to keep a good eye on this.
I think there's a correlation. The longer you wait, you just have a hard time keeping consistency in your structure. So, every day the market moves. And so if you're hiring an MSR or some type of universal teller, for example, and your rate is $18 an hour, and the new group that you're recruiting won't come for $18.25. I mean, that's the rate. You're going to write $18.25 in the offer, and you're going to do it. So your structure becomes less effective the longer you wait. So in our idea, every 2 years keeps that up to date. If you try to stretch it to 3 or 4 years, that's, I think, when you start to get the market adjustments, and you're at risk of losing people because the market's just passing you by.
And then if you haven't done the full study there and you continue creating new positions or reevaluating some of previous positions, your internal equity can start getting out of place, because I think John's famous quote here is that the prices continue to go up. So people look at it as, well, what do I have to do? Quit and get rehired to get a raise around here. So if you're hiring in new positions and creating those positions and not taking the full structure into consideration, things start getting out of balance pretty quickly.
And we had a question come up, but these numbers seem high relative to some things you might be seeing in the marketplace. It was a couple things. One is, remember, this is all budget. So it's market adjustments, promotions, off cycle things you need to do if you're trying to capture, keep somebody there. So remember, that's the overall number we're playing with. And then the second thing is, when you look at some of the national studies, we're talking about much larger workforces. So every tenth of a point can be millions of dollars. We have relatively small workforces, and so our adjustments need to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
You have one IT job where a company, Fortune 500 might have 50 of those jobs. So there's almost an intent to keep that lower because of the combination of how that would work. So again, it's up to you to run your budgets. And so again, as an HR person, whatever number they give you, how are we going to be creative to make sure we get the recognition in the right hands is how we look at that.
Yeah.
So again, these numbers that we're giving in the credit union space simply are from, what our clients are doing and what we're seeing around the country.
And we also take into consideration, we see most people say, okay, we're going to do a 3% merit increase, but then I'll go through the analysis and talk about the experience equity. And that can sometimes add about a 2% increase on there as well, because they need to move people a little bit more competitive in nature or get them in alignment with their structure. So that does add a little bit on
experience
top of
equity. You're talking fancy stuff
here. Oh, experience. Yes. We're compensation guy. I'm sorry.
Yeah. What we're talking about there is the idea is that, okay, you have a salary range, and midpoint should mean total skill acquisition. That employee is following the job description, checking all the boxes, and working at market efficiency. The minimum is almost like a training wage or an apprentice, and then max or stretch, whatever you might call it, is the most we're willing to pay for that job. So we always encourage employees, our credit unions, to go through their census and say, look, here's a guy been here 7 years, not at midpoint, has great evaluations. We love him. Why is he below midpoint?
And so that's paid below the market, essentially.
So what I call that's a loyalty penalty. They've been getting those awesome 2% and 3% raises. If you don't do any type of equity adjustments based on where they are, that's the person we're most at risk. And I always love to look at people that have been with you between 5 and 8 years. Maybe you've had one promotion, because that's the type of person. We got a lot of knowledge in their head. We've got them groomed for that next position, and then they're leaving because we couldn't get them to midpoint because the structure or our process, or we wanted to follow the process and we didn't want to make deviations, and that person got lost in the shuffle, so to speak.
So we provide that metric that kind of raises the flags on those, that if you do have somebody that's getting that loyalty penalty, you can take that into consideration, look at that person as an individual rather than a big picture, and see if you need to make some adjustments there.
Yeah. So you go, hey, we want 3.5%, and somebody pushes back and say, well, I've only seen 2 and 2.1 budgets. Why are we doing more? It's because we need to get some money in the budgets to take care of those situations.
Mm-hmm.
A stronger return on that investment, anything else you'll do, if you can take care of some of those loyalty penalty issues.
Those are your best performers sometimes. So we're looking at salary range increases here. So we do see that there are decreases. This is our research here. We actually surveyed credit unions specifically, and the results show that in 2020, we're looking right around a 3% increase for both non-exempt and exempt, but the executives were about a 3.8. And we're looking at projected salary range increases in 2021, they have decreased. Once again, moving these numbers, this amount is a pretty substantial number. So most credit unions are looking to move their structures around 2.7% next year. And with the executives seeing the same kind of decrease to a 3.6% if you have executive structures.
Jeff, what's interesting about these numbers this year is there's usually been a rule of thumb. Whatever you do for staff, you kind of double that for the executive team. That was kind of the relationship. And this year we've really seen a lot of executives, so to speak, step up and say, look, I'm willing to forego. Let's kind of shelter, shut this down a little bit so we can get more into the staff's hand. Admirable. That's awesome. The optics look great. However, it might be the worst thing we do, because some of those folks, succession planning, we have some high level folks that we need to make sure this is competitive. When we come out of COVID-19, there's going to be a lot of people looking for key talent, and we want to make sure that we've protected our own in this situation. People will remember when we did this. So again, sometimes CEOs or senior level folks are saying, don't do anything for me this year. Let's worry about staff. Totally get it. But, it might not be up to you to make that decision. We might let the board or the
Mhm.
CEO make that decision on making sure that we stay competitive.
And the other piece of this is that these are salary range increases. And I have a couple clients that have increased their salary ranges and said, hey, we're moving through the market and things like that, but they really haven't been moving the individuals
Yeah.
in the salary ranges along with it as well.
Well, it's an and, not a nor, right?
Exactly. So
Let's move some ranges and some employees. Let's just do one or the other.
You got to have those budgets to be able to move them through as well.
Okay. So our next slide here is just to give you a historical perspective, and you can run an inflation line through this. You can run like critical financial crises through this. Obviously, 7, 8, and 9, we saw a dramatic a dip, and then we've built it back slowly over a decade. And then we can kind of see here we go again. Is it going to be a roller coaster? But again, we see a slip, but we don't see panic or crises in the numbers in our forecast. And we would encourage you to kind of make sure that you kind of follow that as well. And when we look at salary ranges, it's perfectly really aligned with inflation, so to speak, because, we were popping up 809, we took a hit, and then it's come back a little bit. I've always, when we put a performance evaluation matrix together, merit increase matrix together, one of the starting points is if you have a 5-point scale and 3 is the definition of acceptable or average or whatever words you use, that should at least be an inflation factor. And then you build multiples of that, because you want to be able to tell employees, if you do your job and you do it well and you do it within acceptable parameters, bread's still going to cost. No, if bread goes up, we're still going to let you buy bread at the same price. So when we look at this, be mindful of, ranges need to be adjusted to keep track with the market. And I guarantee you're probably violating the minimums every day when you make a hire. So if we keep this up, it just keeps the system consistent as we go year after year. So you get a budget. So we had that great question. Is this about budget, overall budgets, or is this about merit increases? And it's the combo. When we look at who should get the money, who should we, weight the priorities, it really comes to some type of system like this. I've talked about this with you guys on a number of occasions that we used to say all members are equal, and we know all members aren't equal because some do lie, steal, and cheat from us. And, we do want to make exceptions for those folks that, do pay back their loans and don't, and fill out their applications correctly. And somehow that morphed or transitioned to all employees are equal. And the challenge is, hey, it's a tight year. Let's give everybody the same thing. Again, the optics look okay, but in reality, we could be disenfranchising some of our superstars and some of our top performers and the people that have done a good job during this year.
Mm-hmm. And this is the thing that just keeps coming back, because last year we talked about this as well as the symposium, as well as in the forecast, about how to really differentiate those critical workforces, how to tease them out. And this really becomes a senior management tool to be able to kind of strategically plan the organization, not particularly talking about the people in the roles, but how those roles are impacting the organization, how much value that role. And that can change. It can be based on the strategic initiatives that you're going through. The critical workforce segment may not be the executives.
Hey, Jeff, think of this. You go, hey, we're doing an IT conversion. We're gonna, over Thanksgiving, we're gonna be shutting down and redoing all that stuff. You have an IT team that's working on that 18 months, 24 years. And then the message this fall is, hey, great. We're freezing wages. We're not moving budgets. There's no evaluation scores. And you just, hey, because, times are tight. That just doesn't resonate with that employee's effort. So how do we make this connection of, we thank people during this time, and we want to allocate some things for those special projects and initiatives. Critical workforce. Yeah. When I started in Craigens, there were about 30, level one, top level IT companies out there. And through mergers and acquisitions, just like any other business, we just have a handful now. And so, that talent is golden and needed. And if you have it, and then to tell such a mixed message of, you're doing great, but we can't do anything. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you for saving the world today. We'll get you next time.
But but think about that. You see those in employee engagement studies too, right? Some of the things, and we'll talk about that in a little bit down the road, because we've been tracking some of that as well. So HR's, contribution to this year's budget cycle is trying to make sure one size doesn't fit all, making sure you're allocating those budget to some of those key areas. And we want to be fair to our core workforce because that's our bread and butter to get stuff done for the membership. However, creatively looking about how we get projects done, how we can take care of specialists, and then our critical workforces.
Yeah.
And I go to, it's pretty easy to nail that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mortgage area, most of our clients hit their annual number by June of what they thought they were going to do, in their mortgage business. We want those folks, focused on the task at hand and not worried whether it's going to be a frozen salary, no merit increase, and those types of things.
Yeah. And this is kind of the big picture perspective of that. And then having your performance management piece tied up in under this as well gives you that aspect of being able to really evaluate and actually reward those top performers and the people that are bringing the disproportionate value to the organization.
And guys, there's no math formula to this. We can't just put this in a spreadsheet and it spits out what a critical person is. Every credit union is going to have a different take on this, but at least have the dialogue.
Yep.
At least have a discussion as to where do you think we can best make an impact.
It's definitely the strategic initiatives there. If you're expanding your mortgage side, and okay, that's going to be the strategic initiative, and you need to focus on that.
Okay.
So,
all right. So hopefully those are numbers that you can go into budget season with. Hey Jeff, tell them about the comp forecast right now. Might as well.
Yeah, the compensation forecast is actually going to go into all of those numbers in more depth and detail. We actually talk about how to leverage some of those, and we actually continue on using those numbers and understanding how to balance those critical workforces, talking about what we're going to talk about now, the top 5 trends in HR, to be able to piece all the pieces together. So we are going to be posting that on our website probably very shortly after this webinar. So in some cases, a lot of people are looking for a copy of these slides so they can get those numbers. I think a better opportunity will be to go to the website, get a request to download that compensation forecast. You'll be able to get all of those numbers that we just talked about. You'll be able to get a lot more depth and detail as well. So probably a good opportunity to go without that.
Because Jeff wouldn't let me do a 10-hour webinar.
Yeah, that's the hard part of doing these is that, that we try to keep it to an hour. There is definitely a lot more than an hour of information in this. So we had to kind of pick and choose what we were going to talk about. There's a lot of great stuff in there. We put a lot of time and effort in that. I mean, this is the 19th year that we've done this.
So, and guys, if you're out there and there's questions specifically about how you're tackling, we're happy to talk on the phone. So give us a call and we can kind of work through, your constraints or what you're thinking about doing. Always happy to do that for folks.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for.
So of the 5 trends, let Jeff kick off this first one here.
The joys of unemployment. And I say that very sarcastically because when it comes down to what has happened in other industries and other areas, we have seen unprecedented levels of unemployment. The hotels industries has been absolutely decimated with recruiters, things along that line. But if you look down the line, and this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you'll see at the bottom the financial services and insurance area, we're hovering right around a 3.6% unemployment rate. So there is a tremendous opportunity in this. Just in the simple fact of, in general, the financial services industry, we recruit internally. We like to go to other credit unions or other banks and try to say, come on over to us, because we want them to bring a particular set of skills. But if we actually go through the process of strategically looking at the roles that we need and looking at the skills and abilities that are really needed in those roles, we might be able to see these in some of these industries here. And I think, John, you pointed it out very, very articulately when we were talking about the Ritz-Carlton. We have these hotels that have just absolutely been decimated through this process. And we're looking at 38% back in July of unemployment. A lot of their top talent was forced to be let go.
And I mean, not to stereotype it, but the training's phenomenal. The experience, the member experience, customer experience is all there. So some of that leverage is really nice into our industry. And I remember when labor was super, super, super tight, we would get in the van, go to the mall. And if somebody treated us nice, here's my business card, come work at a credit union. So why we wanted to start with this trend is we know a lot of volunteers and a lot of folks will be looking at national coverage of the financial or the economy today. And we've got to separate that macro number from the micro issue in our industry. We don't have 4 out of 10 folks unemployed in our industry. We have, 3%.
Mm-hmm.
That means it's still tight. If I could have people raise their hand, how many jobs do you have to fill? Everybody has stuff on their plate that they need to plug into the organization.
I definitely tell you, it has been, especially how many jobs and new roles I've been pricing that have come across my desk. Credit unions are really kind of growing and establishing this new thing. And I mean, in June, we did a study. We looked at 42% of credit unions were still actively hiring at that point in time. So they're pulling in new talent as quick as they can.
And the opportunity here, folks, is, I think I've talked about this before, rookie mistake 101 in business is, and times are tough, you stop marketing and you stop your HR practices. And the ones that emerge from a crisis kind of double down in those areas. So we can take advantage of any of those employers. Maybe it's, maybe they can't help it. Maybe, whatever situation is, if we can show ourselves as good, solid, steady citizens and a great place to work, which we get those accolades all the time, maybe we have a chance for that person to come to work for the credit. And that's what we see as the opportunity here. So again, don't believe the national number. How does it apply to you? And there's actually opportunities here.
Mm-hmm.
So our second trend talks about, how are we going to deal with the new normal?
Or the next new normal, or the next new normal. Go ahead and wait a month and we'll see what the next new normal looks like. So again, we're looking at an opportunity here that we do have to transition. We're going to be changing the perspective in the landscape right now. A recent study said that 88% of people would like to actually have an opportunity to work remotely at least 2 or 3 days a week. Another recent study by KPMG said that 68% of large company CEOs are planning to downsize their workplace because they have the opportunity to work remotely. And with our research, we showed that 40% of credit unions that were surveyed are going to at least consider offering some positions as a permanent remote position. So that does mean that we're looking at a new type of environment that we have to actually take into consideration. And it comes down to, how do we compensate these? We're going to have individuals that may not be local. We may have competition that is not what we would normally expect. We're going to have big companies like Facebook that have said, okay, we're perfectly fine with everybody working remotely consistently now. So they're going to be in the backyard now. And so imagine competing for technology talent.
Or on the deck,
Facebook.
when you're out in the porch and you're in a condo and you wave at the person next to you.
Or the deck. Yes.
Hello, new neighbor.
So we do have to take this stuff into consideration. And this is going to be a trend that's going to be going on for 2-3 more years?
At least.
Yeah, at least. This is going to be a top topic conversation for a long time, because we're going to be talking about cost of living versus cost of labor, and how to actually really incentivize and pull in that top talent, especially when you have these big guys in the backyard now.
So like Facebook made an announcement last month that said, hey, we're going to encourage people to go wherever they want to live and work from home.
Mm-hmm.
Where they spent the last 10 years doing incentives to get people to work in the city, like in New York City, the incentives to,
we'll give you $1,000, come here.
Or 10,000 in some cases.
And we were just talking about another company. I think it was Stripes. They're offering a $20,000 bonus to move out of the city. Mm-hmm. There is however, it comes with a 10% decrease in salary if you go to a lower area.
So the logic with all the really smart people out there says, hey, let people work from wherever they want to work, but then there has to be a commensurate deduction in pay. Well, I'm, Jeff being a Mr. Smarty Pants says, well, I'm going to go find the most expensive place to live in the United States and then demand a 37% increase, right?
That's going to happen, right?
So Zuckerberg thinks, oh yeah, we're going to, reduce pay because they're going to go to Idaho and they're going to go, to some of the lower income places and go, no, people are going to want to keep their pay. And we don't think this is a Fortune 500 problem, because we've dealt with this with a number of credit unions in the last 6 months. Is, we said, how will work from home work? And, are we willing to do discounts to the, to our salary ranges based on that? And one of the key things in the salary administration is you want the employees to perceive that it's fair. So that if anytime that it seems like we're making special accommodations for onesies, twosies, it might as well not be fair, because that's how it's going to be perceived, and people will act that way. The other thing is we want to make sure that it's administratively, relatively, easy to do, are not an overburden for for HR.
Mhm.
I mean, if you have a 500 person workforce and now you're in 47 communities, you want 47 salary ranges? No. So what we've been trying to tackle with our clients that are asking about this is think of zones and not actuals. So maybe you do 2 zones above your hometown market and maybe 2 zones below,
Mhm.
and do you need to go 10% below your current ranges to accommodate somebody that goes to a higher level market? Do you need to go 10% below? I just think that's kind of the floor and ceiling, because if you drop a current employee's salary less than 10%, I don't care how tax advantage it is or cost of living or what the price of gas is, there's that perception is I made X and now I make X minus 10%.
Mhm.
So we've had some better luck, communicating that zone concept to employees that are to employees that are where credit unions are going to adopt this system, but don't try to micromanage it down to the city pairs.
Mhm.
And I think that's a key.
Yeah, you'll definitely be pulling your hair out if you're consistently trying to match different cities. Okay, they've gone to this. Okay, they get a 2.8% decrease or an increase, things along that nature. Having those tier 1, tier 2, or zone 1, zone 2, where it's in a certain range, they land there, they're going to be capable of being able to manage that. I think that the key there is easy to administrate and effective.
Yeah. And so when we look at the hybrid workforce, because that's kind of the buzzword we all have to get into our vernacular now, so to speak. And, all these big bank CEOs got on Bloomberg and the national business channels in March and April and said they got 95% of their folks working from home and they love it. And it's been this seamless operation and they're very proud of everyone, which is that's the party line. And you ask IT how well it went.
Once they catch their breath.
Yeah, they had some work to do. But you talk to the same executives today, they are really committed to getting people back to work by the first of the year. I mean, the buzz is we've got to figure out how to do this. And so this hybrid workforce is, you know, instead of taking care of a person, now we're taking care of the family unit or the home unit, however you want to define that today. But, having to be teacher, caregiver, and, stud employee, that's a lot to juggle. It always has been, but it's going to be exacerbated.
Yep.
So we don't want to create the have and have nots or almost two cultures. And one of the things that we talk about is anybody hired like from June 1st, have you been able to do orientations? Have you done onboarding the same? No, you haven't been. No matter what you tell me, it's just different.
It is.
And so culturally, how are we going to keep these together? So the executives are telling us we want to get people back in some, as long as it's safe. I mean, nobody's putting people at risk. I've never, I haven't run into that situation. But with that, why does a workplace still work? And so, look at this list. I mean, we're still social animals. We still want to talk about how the football game went, and which I love, by the way, all those NFL coaches getting millions of dollars of fines. Oh, this is what power those NFL people wield. I thought it was fascinating.
I think one of the interesting sides of this, and I think it's kind of up here on the bullet points, is that a positive that comes out of this is that as we start recreating these relationships and reevaluating them, and as we start coming back into these relationships, we have a newfound appreciation for them. I mean,
of course.
Yeah, you've been staring at the same four walls for a while.
Of course. So for our executives in the room, just a simple technique that I think will pay big dividends for you. If you're big about walking around and slapping people on the back and catching them doing something good, that's great. And the cliche is how you doing. But what we need to ask today is how are you doing today? Because it's going to be changing by the minute and the hour. And there's not that normal. When I was with D. Hilton for 25 years, instead of getting a watch, David Hilton gave me a all expense trip to do the Michael Jordan basketball fantasy camp. And it was awesome. And I got bit. I actually got bit in a game, and I still wear that. I do. I wear that badge of honor. It's awesome.
Is that a part of that trip? You were going to be bit by somebody?
No, just a little guy.
Extra for that.
Just a little guy was a little aggressive. That's all it was. But one of the things I learned from that, and I've carried with me, is you got all these coaches that coach multi-million-dollar players, and you're supposed to be the person in charge. And so one of the coaches told me every routine of his practice was before we started during the shoot around, he would have his assistants go talk to every person on the team. Where are you today? Where's your head? I got wife problems. I've got girlfriend problems, and I've got girlfriend and my wife knows problems, and I've got kid problems, and I've got my relatives want money problems. And so all those coaches would get together and do a quick reset to say, hey, it's just too intense. We're going to get nothing done today.
Mhm.
And he would send them home. And if a coach values practice and sticks that one way, it doesn't make sense. So by asking that question, how are you today, can really help you focus on what we can get done today
Mhm.
and how those milestones can happen as we get, achieve milestones on the way for a bigger project. So I think that's a great technique that we can continue to use now.
Mhm.
We're gonna,
And that functions well virtually as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be a slap on the back. It's let's talk about how you are today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this idea that we're going to fist bump again, I think I'm doing more elbow bumps.
Yeah.
And I think you need to practice and warm up before you elbow, because you're going to hurt your back.
It's definitely a lower back problem.
It's going to be. So let's be careful with that. And then finally, this cultural thing, I can't stress it enough. Why you need to be looking at employee engagement studies, why you need to be looking at getting some feedback from normal channels. You are not going to get this from an exit interview.
Yeah.
An exit interview in this case is going to be like when girlfriends used to break up with me and they'd say, it's not you, it's me. Well, that's for another.
And if you're,
but we're not going to get the answer. So we really need to make sure that we're investing in those tools to get feedback about how, fear of missing out. Are they having more fun over here? And making sure we're doing a lot of investment in making sure people get connected again.
Absolutely. And this is a good opportunity. If you are not doing employee surveys, it is a very, very good opportunity to start doing those employee opinion surveys. But my standard warning is that if you don't do anything about it, when you get those results, you're in a worse situation. So make sure you're ready to act on those kind of things.
Absolutely. So our third trend talks about what are we going to do? How are we going to unwind some of the programs that we might have put together in the first quarter of the year? So I'm a little concerned and hesitant, but we need to talk about this subject. And so if you name something hazarded pay, which Walmart did, Costco did, some of the banks did, and then you take it away. And I literally had a guy say this quote: if I still have to wear a mask to work, sanitize my hands, and you have to every day wipe down my my workstation, how is this not hazard?
Yeah.
Friday it was and Monday it's not. So as we get back to the end of the year, we're having a lot of clients asking us, what can we do for recognition? Absolutely. If you can carve something out for recognition, not for hazard, let's be careful with semantics, but recognition of walking the walk of your mission statement. I know it sounds hokey, but follow me here. Did you keep access to members' funds? Yeah. Were we able to keep the phones open? Were we able to get money to people when they're in trouble? Did we get them reliable transportation in this time when a lot of people were doing mortgage, whether it was, refinancing or first time people taking the plunge? We were there. We executed great as an organization. So let's recognize that, but let's don't call it hazard pay. Right?
Absolutely.
And again, if we don't keep these salary ranges movement and say we're going to get you later, it's going to show up in an employee engagement survey.
It's going to hit people pretty quickly on those kind of aspects. And the same thing goes true with the budgets as well. The budgets impact people more directly, more instantaneously.
Yeah, good point.
Absolutely. So making sure that you're continuing your promise to maintain competitive nature, even though, yes, it has been a tough financial situation. However, most of the employees and most everyone has risen up to it. They've met the challenge and kind of moved forward. So saying, great guys, you've saved the world again. We're here for another day, another year, and it's going to be a better year next year, and we'll get you then. It's definitely hard.
So one of the things we talk about is, where do you want to be positioned relative to the market? If you only use salary surveys that are 1 or 2 years old and use that as your basis for your decisions, you are lagging the market. So the market moves, you catch up, the market moves, you catch. So your employees get a sense of that. So as HR people, you're like day one, your starting offers can't be competitive. So you have to kind of juggle that a little bit
and balance that.
So lead says, hey, I predict the market's going to be 3%, and so I want to do that. So you catch up to the market. So at the end of the period, like at 12/31, you're matched up with the market, as opposed to on 1/1, you're matched up, and then you're behind every day for the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this tricky thing that we call lead lag, where you say on July 1st, I want to be. So half the year you're leading and half the year you're trailing, so to speak. I just mentioned this technique is I think when you go into pay philosophy discussion and then you go into budget discussions, doing nothing could put you 2 years behind.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you're not consciously doing it, the market's going to keep moving. So when you see, the question says, well, your budget seem a little higher than what we're seeing out there. We're trying to accommodate. We do have folks that take a lead strategy. Say, hey, market, catch me.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously it's not the most conservative, but I guarantee you'll see a lot of high performers willing to do that.
Absolutely.
They're making that investment, and for a point and a half, if we can carve that out and get it into the right hands, those are the folks that are really going to shine in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And shameless plug here, my clients that we do compensation studies for.
Oh, no plugs, please.
No plugs. We'll cut it out later. We offer when we do a regression analysis on your salary structure to show you in relation to the market how competitive you are. So there are certain situations that if you're leading the market quite a long way with your salary structure, when these kind of situations come together, you can actually say, okay, we're going to hold this together. We're going to keep our salary structure here because we're already ahead of the curve, and we're going to focus more on making sure we're getting those individuals up to midpoint.
Absolutely.
And focusing on the people. So giving yourself the most amount of metrics to be able to make the best business strategic decisions is going to be a very valuable asset.
I agree. So our fourth trend, what we're talking about is, remember, we're in charge of reward and recognition programs, not pay systems. And again, we kind of cavalierly always say, hey, how's your pay system doing? Are we competitive? Remember, you have a lot of tools in your arsenal if you use them. So what we're seeing now, some of the studies, like this is a U.S. Chamber of Commerce study that looked at, what are people doing with people staying at home? These are the things that are kind of rising to the top. I don't advocate all of these. They don't make sense for a lot of organizations.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if somebody's one of your employees might be leaving, are these some of the accommodations we might look at? I want everybody back at work.
Yeah, and
so that's, I want to balance this, and we have an obligation to show you what's out there. But these are things that are the recognition and these tools that may or may not cost as much as just giving people a new, some more money, might be things to look at.
Mm-hmm. And it's an opportunity to say, okay, well, the budgets aren't increasing very much, but let's look at other ways to approach this and solve some problems. And there are bigger financial institutions that are offering certain subsidies to be able to say, okay, we know that you have to have childcare because you're working at home and your daycare or something along that line may not be open or whatever it may be. We're going to help you out with that. There's others that are offering opportunities for discounts on laptops and computer stuff to be able to kind of ease the burden into transitioning. Hey, your kid's at home probably studying on the computer right now. Let's get you set up so that's a good process. So the other thing is that, what do we replace Taco Tuesdays with? Or for those really awesome.
No, there's no
companies.
Replacing Taco Tuesdays.
Absolutely. How about Margarita Fridays? Can we keep that too?
No, it's and. It's not an
It's
or.
and. Okay, fantastic. It's not 5:00 somewhere. It's 2020 everywhere. Drink when we need. Okay, so the other trend that we're looking at here is a resurgence of career framework mentalities or concepts and be able to put into place. And we want to be able to make sure that we are clearly defining a differentiation between career frameworks and broadbanding. Broadbanding is something that we did in the past and something that was one of those things that we've kind of moved beyond. And John, you have a great perception on that of how it worked well with the engineers, but not quite so much with credit unions.
Yeah. For the folks that don't know me, I got to spend some time with KPMG and their compensation group in the 90s. And there was this huge philosophical battle going within the firm about broadbanding versus point factor, job factor analysis. And they had two camps. And it was so weird to see a company pitch two different strategies. Well, the guys in Cleveland are going to do this and the guys from Houston are going to do that. So broadbanding made a lot of sense intuitively that in engineering, because supposedly your gifts to engineering as an individual, you peak at like 32 years of age. And so what was happening in the big companies like Boeing and some of the defense contractors. How do we get money in those younger people's hands to keep them around? And so that somehow that got translated to other industries, and not well.
Mhm.
So broadbanding got to financial services, got into credit unions, and it was, okay, if you take a test on loan policy and score 100, okay, you go to this level.
You hear a ding above your head and you get promoted.
Did you make any more loans? No. Well, so all of a sudden we're paying more, making less margin, and we've got all these awesome employees with, 3s and 4s behind their title instead of 1s and 2s.
Mhm.
So it was just a competency grab, and not a lot of times it was tied to performance. And so my concern with career framing is, look, we are substantially, sophisticated organizations as credit unions across the board. But we as a group are very small businesses. We don't have a lot of fake layers in our structure. So I'm always worried if career framework is going to mean, okay, everybody's going to test into a level. They're going to go get their master's instead of their, undergraduate degree. And then we're going to have to pay them more. And then I'm not going to see any movement on the numbers.
The actual production value of this.
Production, yeah.
Yeah. Where's my KPIs, so to speak? So if you're considering the career frameworks, we have a good process in place kind of to be able to put those pieces together. But the biggest thing is that you do have to have somebody there at the organization who is the gatekeeper, who is the administrator of this, and is very passionate about maintaining the value of those.
Yeah. Without that investment,
it's not
this becomes
no good.
This becomes recognizing the wrong things.
Absolutely.
And that's why we are big, huge proponents of pay for performance. I would love to go into an organization and tell an employee that's really a go-getter to say, there's just as much reward and recognition in a horizontal career path than a vertical career path. Because everybody's taught become the boss, become the boss's boss, become CEO one day. That's the way to get ahead. But with pay for performance, if we really have a strong retail person that really resonates well with our membership, why do we want to make them a boss? Because that's the only way we recognize, obviously money is important. So they're going to want to take that path. But I'm saying, why can't you be the best paid person at this job in the country if you're the best performer?
It's kind of an old school mentality of, hey, you are fantastic and a tremendous individual contributor. We should make you a manager so you stop doing what you're doing very well.
Yeah. And again, I think that's one of the toughest jobs in the credit industry is being a branch manager when you've been promoted from within. Now you're telling all your buddies, hey, Jeff, you're not following the dress code. 9:05, it's not a suggestion. We'd like you here when the doors open, right? Because, what do you mean, John? You're the worst one when it comes to, dress code.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to do. So sometimes when people say they don't want to be the boss, that's great. But let's give them an avenue to be successful. And that could be a horizontal career path with the, with pay for performance. So let's make that successful. Okay. All right. Our last trend here that we're going through. The omnichannel phenomenon has blown up this year. We have walked the walk of being accessible 24/7. We have been awesome when it comes to getting this in the field. People in our memberships have been early adopters. We've blown through our projections of how this would work. And the challenge is some of our incentive plans and our variable pay plans and our pay for performance aren't keeping up. And so I got to tell you a quick story. Back in 2000, one of my first jobs with D. Hilton, when we were doing organizational development, I call it the hanging Chad story. So in Florida, this credit union was using referral cards. So like when you went to the branch and said, would you like a mortgage? The teller would fill out a card and then would give it to mortgages with their initials on it. Well, then mortgage would get a hold of that card and call the person. Well, that person didn't do anything. They just gave my business card out. They would literally erase the initials on the card and put their initials on it. So my job, this put one of my kids through college, by the way. My job was to hold the card up to the light and see if it had been doctored or changed to make sure who got credit. And you think about a culture, when we get down to that level, we're not having people helping people and it's every man for himself. And there was a lot of problems with that. But what we see with Omnichannel, we're going to have the same thing. A member does some research online. They call branch A, and then branch B, maybe that's where they fulfill it. And so we actually see people going back to more gain share type plans and team awards and shutting down some of the variable pay. Now, this is not mortgages and this is not wealth management. This is just some of the, the retail and production sides where sometimes gain share plans could be much more valuable. And we're actually doing a lot of projects right now where people are saying, I'm just every day somebody's arguing or complaining about how, we deliver the variable pay. And we want to look at that. So the list here just says when you have an incentive plan that's not working, go through this list, kind of this audit, and then you can see the disconnects of how employees are giving you feedback of how they want to get paid or recognized and how we're doing it. So that's just a quick little cheat sheet.
And this gives you an opportunity to really kind of find out how the front office and the back office is working as well, because you see how many hands are in the pot.
That's the point of Omnichannel is you're going to have IT go through that. You're going to have some back office people that are going to be able to do this automatically without as much interaction. And, we got to be sharp in those areas too.
Well, we were absolutely correct. We've got more than an hour of content, so we'll have to go through this pretty quickly. But we really wanted to illustrate this as one of our longitudinal studies that we've been doing for quite some time now. But obviously, everything except for one thing is trending downwards. So if you look at the bottom one there, in my opinion, unsatisfactory performance should result in no increase in pay. And this kind of goes back to reinforce what we're talking about when we're discussing critical workforces and tying that pay for performance piece in to make sure that the top performers are really being rewarded. Your employees are technically saying, we want that. We would really appreciate the fact that those that are top performers be recognized as such, and those that are not being top performers, not giving the same exact merit increase that I'm given, even though I'm going above and beyond. So this kind of shows that there is an opinion to lean towards that. So if you've created that strategic initiative to make sure that you're separating out this area, that's a great opportunity right here. The other pieces are just as important when it comes down to making sure, but you see that invariably all three of the ones here, I'm fairly compensated, my job is within appropriate pay grade and pay provides. If you are one of our clients and you're kind of seeing these kind of trends, that means the communication internally is not quite well. And if you are not a client and you're actually competitive to the nature as well, this is showing something saying that the communication of how you go through your pay philosophy, how you pay, maintaining that, it's not adding up in their heads and they're not seeing that and feeling that.
Yeah. When we go back to 08 and 09 and look at employee engagement, it was everything's fine, wonderful. And I've said it before, it's like a Putin election, 100% satisfied.
101%.
And then we got into 9 and 10 after having to deal with freezes and, downsizing and those types of things. The message we got from employees was, I'm happy, but the guy next to me, he's really griping. He's going to be out of here if we don't do something.
Comrade isn't doing well.
Comrade, like that. And then 2 years. So then we got into 11, 12, and 13. And then it was like, hey, if you don't do something, I'm out of here. That's how fast the market was moving. So I'm worried that we're going to repeat this pattern. So right now, everybody's fine. Nobody's going to stick their head out and complain or talk about issues. And then it'll be, well, my buddy's not happy. And then it ultimately me. When it gets to me, it's been too late. We're going to lose some talent. So make sure that everybody's kind of monitoring these situations and making sure that employees are, just checking in on employees and those types of things. So at this point, just because we want to keep people, kind of honor the hour commitment that you gave us, which we really appreciate. We're going to have it online, but go ahead and get the full comp forecast because it'll outline some of the charts that we were going to talk about today in terms of employee benefits and executive benefits. Again, it's longitudinal work. So you can see how we've done, the industry has changed year over year. So in the exec benefits, for example, we'll talk about contracts, and we'll talk about car allowances, and we'll talk about special PTO programs. And for employees, we'll be talking about what we're seeing for cost sharing on benefits, as well as PTO plans versus, other types of plans out there. So with that said, Jeff, thank you once again. Good foil for my for my question, so I appreciate it.
I still want to hear more about this dream basketball camp and being bitten, but we'll get to that on the other side of things.
Okay.
Basically, we're going to be having the compensation forecast, like I said, posted on the website. So you'll be able to go to our website, download that, get the full presentation, or excuse me, not the presentation, the full compensation forecast. If you do actually want a copy of the presentation, you can go ahead and email me at jeff@dhilton.com, and I'll get that out to you after the webinar once we get off the microphones. And but you're going to get a lot more information out of the compensation forecast, and it has almost the exact same pictures and slides and numbers. So you'll be able to get the same.
Did you do both?
It's crazy talk. I don't know what you're talking about.
Did you steal that from someone?
It's possible.
Okay.
So, we have one question, structure movement.
Yeah, we're going to ask one question, then we'll get you out of here, guys.
Standpoint. Sorry, it's a long question, so we're digesting this one. So, John, moving structures by certain percentage every year based on what surveys are saying, or is the average structure movement? Or are you looking at it more from a standpoint of where the majority of the workforce of the company is in the structure? If the majority is above midpoint, is it time to move it?
Again, that's a great question, because it kind of talked about that theme today. Is if you're going to do one size fits all, then you're probably going to dilute your efforts in a number of places. So our recommendation or suggestion is to prioritize those key workers or critical workforce and separate that from those other areas. And I think that's where you'll get the budget allocation where you need it to be. We talked earlier about how often you should do a study. And so if you look at every 2 years, one of the process should be as kind of a reprioritization of your hierarchy. Which means that some jobs move faster than others in terms of supply and demand value to the organization. So if I go to an organization and worked with them 5 years and they have the exact same salary structure, same jobs in the same spot, I'm going, your business has your business changed? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So either they've accommodated other ways, but structurally it's not walking the walk of what they're actually doing, or they're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. So obviously kind of use that for that diagram that we had about critical workforces to see where you spend your money. Hours. One quick thing.
We have so much to talk about.
One of the things, like when you look at range spreads between minimum and maximum,
mm-hmm.
you typically see 40 or 50% spreads, but you really need to look at, is it really going to take 5 years for a person to really know how to be an MSR? Because that's what you're saying. So sometimes we look at tighter range
30-35%
range spreads. And the other place I like to do tighter range spreads is like first line managers. If they're not cut out to be a manager, I don't want to have them to have a nice long runway to be mediocre. I want to make a call, are they going to be a manager or not? So when you look at your system, if you're trying to where to put the money, don't automatically think you have to have 40% spreads and then 50% spreads for your executives, because you might be sending the wrong message or delaying an issue. So
right. And to the point, it's not so much that we're a proponent of just moving the structures just because if you don't do a full compensation study and have an analysis of where you stand in the market, probably a good idea to go ahead and move them based off of the surveys.
Yeah, because it's the world's moving.
The world is moving.
And this hour went by like in 10 minutes. So.
Yeah, exactly. So. And if you don't know where you're landing as far as in relation to the market, you're just going to have to move them. But if you are actually doing compensation studies and getting that understanding of where you're landing in relation and competition to the market based on your pay philosophy, then you can have the balance of, should we move them, should we not move them, and how much should we move them? Okay. So it'll give you another point to make is that if you go to the website, we'll have a recording of this webinar posted on there. It'll probably take us about 3 to 5 days to get that posted, but that should be up there. So just in case if you have to drop off, I think we got one last question. Do you want to go to the last question there? If you have to drop off, you can hear the remainder of that question.
Yeah, we need to cover those at a later date.
Sounds good.
We'll talk one-on-one. I just want to wrap up today, just thanking you guys for inviting us in today to take part on this. We take this commitment seriously to provide data to the industry and maybe some different takes that you might see from standard takes on the data. Our ultimate goal is to make sure you have a shop that's high performing, and we just enjoy seeing folks around the country doing such great things.
Mhm.
And this year it's been incredible.
Yeah.
So again, thank you for giving us this opportunity. We're accessible and get you this information. We'll get you these decks. If you got a strategic planning meeting coming up, just as long as, you have proper attribution, we're happy to share all this material with everyone.
Absolutely.
So let's get everybody to lunch or home or wherever they need to be.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We do sincerely appreciate it. We'll catch you next time. We have a webinar on the 30th coming up, talking about the challenges of serving SEGs during the COVID. And we're actually going to have special guest presenters from BCU. So look forward to that one. You can sign up for those on the website if you're not receiving those emails saying, hey, we're doing a webinar. But until then, thank you so much for joining us. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk with you again soon. Thank you so much.
All the best.
Bye-bye.